The following testimony was extracted from Sergeant Takeshi Yamada, Imperial Japanese Army, 18th Division, during interrogation at Ledo Road Forward Operating Base, March 1944. Subject displayed severe psychological deterioration. Medical examination revealed no physical injury. Subject died by self-inflicted means 17 hours after this recording. Original report remains classified under Colonial Office Protocol 7 Black. They tell me I need to explain what happened to 2nd Company. They tell me the coordinates, the tactical disposition, the enemy contact reports. They want me to fill in their maps with little symbols that make sense to men who push papers in Calcutta and London. But there are no symbols for what we found in the Yukon Valley. There are no tactical designations for the thing that took my men, one by one, until I was the only one left to walk out of that green hell with the sound of their screaming still echoing in my skull. I will tell them what they want to hear. I will give them their report, but I know they will not believe me. I know they will mark my file with whatever designation they use for men whose minds have shattered under the weight of the jungle. And perhaps they are right. Perhaps I am mad. But madness, I have learned, is sometimes the only rational response to encountering something that should not exist. March 4th, 1944, Yukon Valley, northern Burma. The rain had not stopped for 6 days. We moved through the jungle in a column, 63 men spread across 100 meters of muddy trail that could barely be called a path. The canopy above us was so thick that even at midday, we walked in a perpetual twilight, our boots squelching in mud that seemed to have no bottom, our uniforms rotting against our skin from the constant moisture. The air itself felt alive, pressing against us with a humid weight that made every breath an effort. Lieutenant Nakamura led from the front, as he always did. He was a good officer, perhaps too good for the assignment we had been given. We were a screening unit, pushed far forward of the main defensive positions around Myitkyina, tasked with observing enemy movements and reporting back via radio twice daily. Simple reconnaissance, simple orders. Nothing in those orders had prepared us for what the jungle held. I was 3rd in command, responsible for the radio and for maintaining communication with division headquarters. The radio had been malfunctioning since we crossed the Tanai River 3 days prior. At first, it was just static, the normal interference one expects in mountainous jungle terrain. But by the 2nd day, the static had taken on a quality I had never heard before. It pulsed, almost rhythmically, like breathing. Like something alive was listening to our transmissions and responding in a language we could not understand. I had mentioned this to Nakamura. He had looked at me with those patient eyes and said, "The jungle plays tricks on us all, Sergeant. Check the equipment. Report if the malfunction persists." I had checked the equipment. Every connection, every wire, every battery cell. Everything was functioning within normal parameters. And still, that breathing static persisted. By March 4th, we had been out of direct contact with division for 18 hours. Our last confirmed transmission had been a routine position report. Coordinates, weather conditions, no enemy contact. We had acknowledged their response, heard the operator's voice clearly through the static, and then the carrier wave had simply died. Not faded, not degraded, died as if someone had reached through the radio and strangled it. Nakamura ordered us to continue the patrol. We would reach the ridge line above the valley by nightfall, establish a defensive position, and attempt to restore communications from higher ground. It was a sound tactical decision. It was also the decision that doomed us all. Private Sato was the first to notice the trees. We had stopped for a 10-minute rest. The men were exhausted, several showing early signs of jungle fever, and Sato had wandered a few meters off the trail to relieve himself. When he came back, his face had gone the color of old paper. "Sergeant," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "the trees, look at the trees." I followed his gaze into the jungle on the eastern side of the trail. At first, I saw nothing unusual. The same massive teak and mahogany trunks rising into the canopy, the same strangler figs wrapped around them like serpents, the same curtains of vines hanging in the still air. Then I saw what Sato had seen, and I felt something cold settle in the base of my spine. The trees were marked, not with the crude machete slashes that soldiers used to mark trails. These were symbols, carved deep into the bark, intricate patterns that seemed to writhe in my peripheral vision, but resolved into simple geometric shapes when I looked at them directly. They covered dozens of trees, hundreds perhaps, extending far into the jungle on both sides of our position. The carvings were old. The bark had begun to heal around them, but not so old that the jungle had reclaimed them entirely. Nakamura came to look. He stood silently for a long moment, his hand resting on the pommel of his officer's sword. "Indigenous markings," he said finally. "Tribal boundaries, perhaps, or religious sites." "Sir," I said carefully, "we're 60 kilometers from the nearest known village. Intelligence briefings indicated this valley was uninhabited." "Intelligence briefings," Nakamura replied, "are written by men who have never set foot in this country. Resume the column. We move in 5 minutes." But as we formed up and began moving again, I caught Corporal Tanaka staring at the marked trees with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Tanaka was from Hokkaido, a fisherman's son who had survived the fighting in China and the Philippines without showing fear. Now his eyes were wide, his breathing rapid. "You recognize those marks?" I asked him. He shook his head quickly, too quickly. "No, Sergeant, just. My grandfather used to tell stories about things that lived in the old forests before the temples came, things that left marks on the trees to warn people away." "Superstition," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Yes, Sergeant," Tanaka replied. But he kept his rifle at the ready as we moved, and I noticed he was careful to stay near the center of the column, away from the jungle walls on either side. The marked trees continued for 3 kilometers. Then they stopped, abruptly, as if we had crossed some invisible boundary. The jungle beyond looked the same, perhaps too much the same. I realized after another 100 meters that I could no longer hear birds. The constant background noise of the jungle, the screams of gibbons and the calls of hornbills and the chatter of 1,000 insects, had gone silent. We walked through a green cathedral of absolute quiet. Our footsteps and the creak of our equipment the only sounds. Even the rain, which had finally begun to ease, fell with a strange muffled quality, as if the air itself had thickened around us. "Weapons check," Nakamura ordered, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Count off." We counted, each man calling out his number and status. All 63 present and accounted for, all weapons functional, all men reporting ready for action. But I could see in their faces what I felt in my own chest, a growing sense that we were being watched by something vast and patient and utterly inhuman. The trail began to slope upward as we approached the ridge line. The jungle closed in, the path narrowing until we had to move in single file, branches whipping at our faces, vines catching at our equipment. The light, already dim, faded to a murky green twilight that made it difficult to see more than a few meters ahead. That was when Private Hasegawa disappeared. He had been 7th in the column, directly behind Tanaka. When we reached a small clearing near the ridge crest and Nakamura called for another count, Hasegawa did not respond. Tanaka swore he had been there just moments before, had heard his footsteps, had felt him brush past as they navigated a particularly dense section of trail. We searched for 2 hours, calling his name, spreading out in a careful grid pattern, examining every meter of jungle within a 100-meter radius of the point where he had last been seen. We found nothing. No blood, no signs of struggle, no torn equipment, no tracks leading away from the trail except our own. It was as if Hasegawa had simply ceased to exist between one step and the next. Nakamura's face was grim as he ordered us to establish our night position on the ridge. "We search again at first light," he said. "Hasegawa may have become disoriented, may be sheltering nearby. We will find him." but I saw the doubt in his eyes. And I saw the way the men glanced at the jungle around us, their fingers never far from their triggers, their faces pale beneath the grime and exhaustion. We dug in as the light failed completely, establishing a defensive perimeter with overlapping fields of fire. Standard procedure, textbook infantry tactics, as if tactics meant anything against whatever had taken Hasegawa. I set up the radio in the command post, a shallow depression beneath an overhang of rock that offered some protection from observation and the returning rain. I extended the antenna, checked the connections, powered up the transmitter. The radio hummed to life, and immediately the static filled my headphones. But it was not static anymore, not really. It was voices. They spoke in a language I did not recognize, consonants that seemed to catch in my throat just from hearing them, vowels that resonated with harmonics no human voice should be able to produce. The words, if they were words, rose and fell in a cadence that reminded me of religious chanting, but wrong somehow, the rhythm off by fractions of seconds that made my head ache and my vision blur at the edges. I tore off the headphones and stared at the radio. The frequency dial had not moved. We were still tuned to Division's channel, but the voices continued, faint now but still audible through the speaker. Sergeant, it was Nakamura crouching beside me, his face concerned. What is it? The radio, sir, listen. He leaned close to the speaker. His expression did not change, but I saw his hand tighten on his sword. Can you identify the source? No, sir. It's coming through on our frequency, but the signal strength suggests it's very close, within a few kilometers at most. The British, the Americans. No, sir. I met his eyes. This is not any Allied code or language I've ever heard. This is not any language I've ever heard. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the voices weave their incomprehensible patterns through the speaker. Then Nakamura reached out and switched off the radio. We maintain radio silence until we can establish proper communications, he said. Post double guards tonight, 2-hour rotations. No one goes beyond the perimeter for any reason. Understood? Yes, sir. But as he moved away to check the other positions, I found myself staring at the radio, at the dark speaker grill, and wondering what would happen if I turned it back on. What else might I hear, speaking to me through the static? What might answer if I transmitted back? I did not turn it on again that night, but I wish I had. Because if I had established what was coming before it arrived, perhaps more of my men would have survived. The night was the longest of my life. We sat in our foxholes, staring out into a darkness so complete that it seemed solid, like looking into the void between stars. The jungle had not grown louder with the setting of the sun. If anything, the silence had deepened, becoming oppressive, a weight against our eardrums that made us strain to hear anything. The snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, any sign of movement or life. But there was only silence, and in that silence things moved. I did not see them clearly. No one did. They were shapes in the darkness, darker than the darkness around them, man-sized but wrong in their proportions, their movements too fluid, too silent for anything human. They circled our perimeter just beyond the range of vision, occasionally passing between the trees in a way that blocked the faint starlight filtering through gaps in the canopy. The guards saw them. Every man on watch that night reported the same thing. Shadows moving in the jungle, always at the edge of vision, never close enough to fire upon, never far enough away to ignore. And with the shadows came the smell. It started as a faint corruption on the air, like rotting vegetation and old meat. By midnight, it had intensified until several of the men were vomiting, and we had to rotate the guard positions more frequently because men could not stay at the perimeter without becoming sick. The smell seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, thick and cloying, coating our throats and lungs with every breath. And beneath the smell, so faint I thought at first I was imagining it, was a sound. A humming, deep and resonant, felt more than heard, like standing near a massive temple bell after it has been struck. It pulsed in rhythm with the voices I had heard on the radio, rising and falling in that same wrong cadence that made my teeth ache and my vision swim. At 2:37 hours, Private Yashida began screaming. He had been on watch at the eastern edge of our perimeter, his position covering the trail we had used to ascend the ridge. When the screaming started, it was not the scream of a man in pain or under attack. It was the scream of a mind breaking, a sound of pure existential terror that froze every man in place for a critical few seconds. By the time we reached Yashida's position, he had stopped screaming. He sat in his foxhole, his rifle lying in the mud beside him, both hands pressed against the sides of his head so hard that his fingers had drawn blood where the nails dug into his scalp. His eyes were wide and unblinking, staring at something only he could see. Private Yashida, Nakamura grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. "Report, what did you see?" Yashida's mouth moved, but no sound came out except a thin whining noise, like air escaping from a broken bellows. Saliva ran down his chin. His pupils were dilated so wide that his eyes looked black. "Get him to the command post," Nakamura ordered. "Corporal Tanaka, take his position. Everyone else stay alert. Whatever is out there, it wants us afraid. Do not give it that satisfaction." But we were afraid. We were terrified. Because Yashida had been a good soldier, steady under fire, the kind of man you wanted beside you in combat. And now he sat in the command post, rocking back and forth, that thin whining sound still coming from his throat, his mind gone somewhere we could not follow. The rest of the night passed in slow agony. The shadows continued their circling. The smell grew stronger. The humming vibration increased until I could feel it in my bones, in my teeth, in the fluid of my eyes. And through it all, Yashida rocked and whined and stared at nothing, a warning of what awaited us all if we stayed in this place. Dawn came not as a relief, but as an even more profound horror. Because when the gray pre-dawn light finally filtered through the canopy, we saw what the darkness had hidden, and we understood, with a clarity that burned like acid, that we were not alone in the Hukong Valley. We had never been alone. We had been led here, herded like animals to a killing ground that had existed long before human soldiers had ever set foot in Burma. The trees around our perimeter were covered in the same symbols we had seen on the trail. They had not been there when we had established our position. I knew this with absolute certainty, because I had personally checked the surrounding jungle for threats and had marked each tree that provided cover for a potential enemy sniper. These carvings were fresh, the bark still weeping sap, and they completely encircled our position in a pattern that looked less like writing and more like a containment seal. But the carvings were not the worst discovery. Between the marked trees, hanging from vines that had not been there the night before, were objects that had once been human. I say objects because bodies implied an intact form, and these were not intact. They had been opened, carefully and precisely, their internal structures exposed and arranged in patterns that suggested ritual purpose rather than violence. The flesh had not been torn or cut with any blade I recognized. The edges were too clean, too precise, as if the bodies had simply decided to unfold like flowers blooming. There were dozens of them, far more than our missing 63rd man could account for. These bodies had been here longer, weeks perhaps, but preserved somehow against the rapid decomposition the jungle usually inflicted. I recognized the uniforms, British, Chinese, and yes, several Japanese from units that had passed through this region months ago. Units that had been marked as missing in action, their fate unknown. Now we knew their fate, and we knew ours as well, unless we could escape this place before full dark returned. "Pack up," Nakamura's voice was hoarse but steady. "We're moving out. Now, leave anything that isn't essential. We move fast and we don't stop until we're off this ridge." "Sir," I said quietly, pulling him aside. "The men, they're close to breaking. Yashida is catatonic. Hasegawa is still missing. And those things," I gestured at the hanging figures, They're going to spread panic through the entire unit. I know, Sergeant. His eyes were hollow, exhausted. But we have no choice. We stay here, we die here. We move, we at least have a chance. What about the radio? Division needs to know. Division is 100 kilometers away and might as well be on the moon. He gripped my shoulder and I felt him shaking. Whatever is in this jungle, it's beyond anything in our tactical doctrine. We survive first. We report later, if there is a later. We formed up in the growing light, abandoning our position, our packs, everything except our weapons and water. Yasuda had to be carried, still catatonic, by two men who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. The rest of the unit moved with the mechanical precision of extreme stress, each man focusing on the simple task of putting one foot in front of the other, not looking at the things hanging in the trees, not thinking about what had made them. But I thought about it. I could not stop thinking about it, because those bodies had been arranged to convey a message, and the message was clear even though I did not understand the language. We are claiming this place. We have always claimed this place. You are trespassers in a territory older than your species, and the price of trespass is what you see before you. We descended the ridge at a near run, discipline abandoned in favor of pure survival instinct. The trail was treacherous, slick with mud and rain, and twice men fell, rolling several meters before catching themselves against trees or rocks. No one stopped to help them up. We just kept moving, driven by the primal need to put distance between ourselves and whatever dwelt on that ridge. We had made perhaps 2 kilometers when the jungle changed again. The marked trees returned, but these were different. The symbols were larger, deeper, and they glowed with a faint phosphorescence even in the growing daylight. They formed a corridor through the jungle, a pathway that had not existed on our ascent, leading deeper into the valley rather than back the way we had come. "Sir," I gasped, catching up to Nakamura at the head of the column. "The trail, it's wrong. This isn't the way we came." "I know," his face was gray, "but look behind us." I turned. Behind our column, the jungle had closed in, the vegetation so dense it formed a living wall. The trail we had just descended had vanished, overgrown with vines and ferns and thorns that looked like they had been there for decades. And in the shadows beneath the canopy, shapes were moving, packing us, matching our speed. We were being herded. "We follow the marked trail," Nakamura said. "We have no other choice. Keep the men together, if anyone falls behind." He did not finish the sentence. We both knew what happened to men who fell behind. The marked trail led us down, always down, into the deepest part of the valley where the canopy was so thick that we walked in perpetual twilight. The air grew colder, despite the tropical heat, and the smell of rot intensified until it felt like we were breathing liquid decay. The humming vibration returned, stronger now, resonating through the ground beneath our feet. After an hour of descent, the trail opened into a clearing. I use the word clearing, but it was not natural. Something had carved this space out of the jungle with deliberate precision, removing trees and vegetation in a perfect circle perhaps 200 meters in diameter. The ground was bare earth, hard-packed and dark, and at the center of the clearing rose a structure that should not have existed. It was not a building in any conventional sense. It was geometry made solid, angles that hurt to look at directly, surfaces that seemed to recede into impossible depths despite being only meters away. The structure, or structures, it was difficult to tell if it was one object or many, rose perhaps 15 meters into the air, but its size seemed to shift depending on the angle of observation. From the west, it appeared squat and massive. From the south, tall and narrow. And from directly in front, it seemed to occupy more space than the clearing itself could contain, extending into dimensions my eyes could perceive, but my mind could not process. The marked trees surrounded the clearing in a perfect ring, their symbols glowing brighter now, pulsing in rhythm with the humming that vibrated through my bones. And around the base of the impossible structure, arranged in concentric circles, were more bodies, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, Soldiers from every nation fighting in Burma, British, Japanese, American, Chinese, Indian. All opened, all arranged, all perfectly preserved in their final moment of revelation. Nakamura stopped at the edge of the clearing. The entire column bunched up behind him, each man staring at the scene before us, minds struggling to encompass what we were seeing. "Sergeant," Nakamura said, and his voice was distant, dreamy, as if he was speaking from very far away. "Do you hear them?" I did hear them. The voices from the radio, but clearer now, no longer filtered through static. They came from the structure itself, or from beneath it, or from everywhere at once. They sang in harmonics that should not have been possible with biological vocal cords, weaving patterns of sound that carried meaning beyond language, directly into the base of the brain where instinct and terror lived. And I understood. In that moment, staring at the geometry that should not exist, listening to the voices that sang in frequencies no human should hear, I understood what we had found. This place had always been here. Long before the war, before the British came to Burma, before human civilization had spread into these jungles, this place had existed. A doorway, a thin place, a location where something vast and incomprehensible pressed against the membrane of our reality, creating ripples and distortions in the fabric of space itself. The structure was not built. It had grown, or emerged, or was in the process of emerging, pushing through from somewhere else with glacial patience. The bodies were not sacrifices or victims. They were a side effect. What happened when human consciousness came too close to something so fundamentally alien that the mind could not survive contact intact. The marked trees were not warnings. They were a containment system, ancient and sophisticated, built by people who had understood what dwelt in this valley long before modern armies had stumbled into it. And we, in our ignorance and arrogance, had broken that containment just by being here, by bringing our radios and our weapons and our human presence into a space that was meant to remain empty. "We need to leave," I heard myself saying. "Now we need to leave now." But it was already too late. The shadows had stopped moving. They stood at the edge of the clearing, forming a perfect ring around us, and now in the clear daylight I could see them properly for the first time. I wish I could say they were monsters, creatures, demons, anything that would fit into a category my mind could process. But they were none of those things. They were shapes that existed in the space between human perception, forms that my eyes saw but my brain refused to record accurately. Each time I tried to focus on one, my vision would slide away, and I would be looking at something else, something different, as if they existed in multiple states simultaneously, and my consciousness could only perceive fragments at a time. But I knew, with that same terrible clarity, what they were. They were priests, or guards, or perhaps both. Attendants to the thing that pressed against reality in this valley, maintaining the ancient protocols, performing the rites that kept the boundary intact. And we had disrupted their work. One of the shapes moved forward, gliding across the ground without any visible means of locomotion. It approached Nakamura, who stood frozen, his hand on his sword but making no move to draw it. The shape extended something that might have been a limb, might have been a branch of the structure itself. The distinction was impossible to tell. And Nakamura began to unfold. He did not scream. He should have screamed, but he made no sound at all as his body opened like a lotus flower, his internal structures emerging into configurations that defied anatomy while somehow remaining functional. His eyes stayed focused, aware, watching his own transformation with an expression that was not pain or fear, but something closer to religious ecstasy. That was when the discipline broke completely. The men scattered, running in all directions, some toward the jungle, some back up the trail, some deeper into the clearing in blind panic. The shapes moved among them, and where they touched, men began to transform, to unfold, to join the growing pattern of bodies that ringed the structure. I ran. I will not pretend otherwise. I abandoned my command, my duty, my honor, and I ran like a terrified animal, back the way we had come, up the trail that had led us into this nightmare. I expected at any moment to feel that terrible touch, to experience my own unfolding, but it never came. Maybe I was too insignificant to notice. Maybe they had already taken what they needed from our unit. Or maybe, and this is what I believe in my darkest moments, they let me go deliberately, let one man escape to carry the story, to warn others to stay away, to reinforce the containment protocols that our presence had threatened. I do not remember the climb back to the ridge. I have flashes, pulling myself up muddy slopes, branches cutting my face, my lungs burning with each breath. The sun was setting by the time I reached the top, and I did not stop. I could not stop. Behind me, the humming had intensified to a volume that I felt rather than heard, a vibration that threatened to shake my bones apart. I ran through the night, through the marked trees, through the jungle that seemed to actively assist my flight, paths opening before me that had not been there before. I ran until my legs gave out and I collapsed on a trail I recognized, a patrol route I had walked a dozen times, familiar and safe and real. Allied troops found me 2 days later, more dead than alive, raving about shadows and structures and geometry that ate men's souls. They carried me to Ledo, and eventually to this room where British intelligence officers with skeptical eyes and careful notes take down my testimony. They do not believe me. I can see it in their faces. They think the jungle broke me, that I watched my unit get ambushed by Japanese or British or American forces. The war has no clear lines in Burma, and my mind invented this story to cope with the trauma. But I know the truth, and I know it is not over. Because 2 days ago, when they allowed me to see a map to mark the location where we found the structure, I saw something that froze the blood in my veins. The coordinates I gave them, the location of the clearing and the impossible geometry. According to British records, there is no valley there. No depression in the topography, no geographic feature at all. Just a notation on the map, unexplored region, indigenous reports of religious significance, entry prohibited by local custom. And beneath that, in smaller text added by someone's careful hand, 7th expedition failed to return. Region considered hostile. Further exploration suspended pending resource availability. 7th expedition. How many others have stumbled into that valley? How many other units from how many other armies have been led down that marked trail to feed the growth of something that presses against our reality from the other side? I tried to tell them they needed to destroy it, to bomb the valley until nothing remained, to salt the earth and burn the jungle and bury the whole region under concrete, if that was what it took. They smiled patiently and made notes and gave me more morphine to help me sleep. But I cannot sleep, because every night when I close my eyes, I hear the voices. They sing to me through the static in my head, and each night they grow clearer, more insistent. They are calling me back, calling me home to that valley, to that clearing, to the structure that waits with infinite patience for the barriers to weaken and the way to open fully. And some nights, I want to answer. Some nights, I want to walk back into that jungle, to find that trail of marked trees, to return to the only place where I finally understood how small and insignificant we are, how brief our civilizations burn against the vast darkness of time and space. The doctors say I am getting worse. They are preparing transfer orders, recommending I be sent to a facility back in Japan where I can receive long-term psychiatric care. They do not understand that there is no care for what I have seen, no medication for knowledge that should never have entered a human mind. Last night, I managed to get a message to my family. I told them I loved them. I told them to remember me as I was before Burma, before the valley, before I learned what waits in the spaces between our reality and whatever lies beyond. I told them not to search for my body. Because when I am gone, and I will be gone soon, I can feel the structure's pull growing stronger every hour. I do not know what they will find. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps something that looks like me but has been opened and arranged in patterns that serve purposes beyond human comprehension. The voices are very clear now. They are almost here, almost real. And I understand, finally, what they are saying, what they have been saying all along in their language of impossible harmonics and geometric syntax. The door is opening. The time of preparation is nearly complete. The pattern is almost full. And we, all of us, Japanese and British and American and Chinese, all of us who fight and die in this jungle, we are not warriors or enemies or heroes. We are building materials, components, necessary elements in a structure that has been under construction for longer than our species has existed, assembled from the opened bodies and transformed consciousness of everyone foolish enough to enter the valley where the boundary grows thin. I can see them now, the shapes standing in the corners of this room, waiting patiently for the moment when I finally understand what I am meant to do. And I do understand. I have always understood since the moment I first heard their voices through the radio static. They are not evil. They are not malevolent. They simply exist in a state so foreign to human comprehension that our minds cannot survive contact without fundamentally changing. And that change, that transformation, that unfolding into configurations that serve their purposes, that is not cruelty. That is integration. That is becoming part of something vaster and more ancient than our little wars and brief lives could ever encompass. The doctors will find this testimony tomorrow morning. They will find my body as well, or what remains of it. They will write reports, make recommendations, file everything away in archives that will gather dust until the next soldier stumbles into that valley, and the pattern grows another element closer to completion. And in decades or centuries or millennia, when enough components have been gathered and properly arranged, when the structure has grown large enough and the door has opened wide enough, something will step through from the other side. Something vast and patient and utterly beyond our capacity to resist or comprehend. The soldiers in Burma think they are fighting each other, but they are wrong. We are all fighting the same war against an enemy that does not care about our nations or our ideologies or our desperate struggles for survival. An enemy that simply wants us to understand what we really are. Building materials for a structure that will outlast our species. The voices are here now, in the room, in my head, in my bones and blood and the spaces between my thoughts. They are beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with human aesthetics. They promise transformation, integration, purpose beyond the meaningless violence of our little war. And I am so very tired of being afraid. End of recovered testimony. Subject Takeshi Yamada, Sergeant, Imperial Japanese Army, died at 3:47 hours, March 8, 1944. Medical examination revealed no apparent cause of death. Body exhibited unusual post-mortem characteristics. Tissue remained warm for 72 hours. Pupils retained reactivity to light. And on the morning of March 11, examining physician reported that subject's internal organs had rearranged themselves into a configuration inconsistent with known human anatomy. Body was cremated per standard protocols before detailed examination could be completed. This report remains classified under Protocol 7 Black. In April 1944, Allied forces overran Japanese positions in northern Burma and advanced through the Yukon Valley. Patrol reports from that period note unusual geographic anomalies and unexplained casualties, but provide few details. In June 1944, a British engineering unit was dispatched to survey the region for potential airfield construction. The unit's report, heavily redacted, notes that a specific valley matched none of the topographic surveys and that indigenous guides refused to enter the area, citing bad ground and old temples. The engineering unit recommended against development, citing unknown strategic hazards. No further exploration was authorized. In October 1944, American forces reported contact with a Japanese unit in the same region. a unit that, according to records, had been completely destroyed 3 months earlier. The report describes the Japanese soldiers as non-responsive and exhibiting severe psychological disturbance. When American forces attempted to take the survivors prisoner, the Japanese soldiers collapsed and could not be resuscitated. Medical examination revealed anatomical inconsistencies incompatible with life. The bodies were buried in a mass grave that was subsequently lost when the region was retaken by Japanese forces in November. Today, the Yukon Valley is largely uninhabited. Local tribes continue to regard portions of the valley as sacred and dangerous, off-limits to outsiders. Myanmar government surveys list several areas as unexplored, despite the region's relatively accessible terrain. In 2003, a team of Western anthropologists received permission to study indigenous religious sites in the valley. The team's vehicle was found abandoned on a logging road 2 days after they entered the forest. No trace of the researchers was ever recovered. The valley remains closed to outside access. The trees, according to the few locals who will discuss the region, continue to bear marks. And at night, when the wind moves through the canopy, those who live on the valley's edges say you can hear voices singing in harmonics no human throat could produce. The door, whatever it is, continues to grow, waiting with the patience of something that measures time in geological epochs, not human lifetimes, waiting for the pattern to complete, waiting for enough components to be gathered and properly arranged, waiting for the moment when the boundary finally fails, and what has been pressing against our reality from the other side finally steps through. The war in Burma ended in 1945, but in the Yukon Valley, something else continues, something that predated the war, something that will continue long after our species has faded into extinction, and new civilizations arise to stumble into valleys that should remain empty. And when they come, as they inevitably will, the marked trees will be waiting. The structure will be waiting. The voices will be waiting. Always waiting. Always singing. Always building toward completion.